In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy Podcast. We're back at it again with episode 71, and we're talking Hero with Jet Li. And it's one of those movies that I almost want to say Jet Li's Hero or something like that to like better describe it. Because if I just say hero, I think it gets confusing. It's such like a generic term. But you can find the show notes and more for this episode at actualanarchy.com/71. I have my co-host with me, Robert, who just got back from a government-sponsored event about fires, and I just got a fence built. We were talking about that in pre-show. Some really good content there, and if you want access to that, support us on Patreon, and you will get the behind-the-scenes that includes pre-show content and the post-show, which we call affectionately Kathleen Turner Overdrive. So you can find that at patreon.com/readrothbard and support us there to get that wonderful, amazing content that we save for behind the paywall because it's top quality shit. Speaking of top quality shit, how are you, Robert, and how was your date last night?
Yeah, if you have the means, I highly recommend it. It is so choice, the paywall content. Sometimes we save our juiciest, raw, hardcore, the real thoughts. This is not this sanitized crap that we shovel at you on the regular show. You get the real primo shit when you get what you pay for. So, how's my date last night? So I went to an art show last night. God, I'm just such a man about town. Hanging out in this cabin in the woods, being Mr. Lonely Pants, crazy guy. But then every once in a while, I'll creep into town. And last night it was an art show. It was a 3-person art show, and I don't know, it was all right. It was pretty good. Talked to some ladies. But then, tonight was a discussion on the raging wildfire situation and what could possibly be done about it and what the causes are and what some possible solutions are. And, of course, they don't actually say the real solutions, which is privatize everything and get government out of the way, allow people to fix things and not be reliant upon government to think the problem is being taken care of. Because a lot of private landowners, they'll buy like 100-acre land and just expect the National Forestry Service to come in and save their asses when it catches on fire. So instead of doing more proactive measures, which they admit are the answer, but then they don't, in one breath they'll talk about the problems that government creates, but then the answers are always, well, we just need to change government a little bit, have government change the laws just a little bit, talk to your authorities. But yeah, frustrating. That's how it goes.
Well, I mean, they are experts on the matter because they created most of those problems, right? So who better to try to fix them and make them work?
Right, yeah. I mean, you can't. Who was it that said? Was it Twain that said you can't fix the problem with the same mentality that caused it, or something like that? I would throw that upon almost every government-created issue. I mean, I can't even think of a single one outside of maybe like a super temporary situation, like where there's a government worker and they like set something on fire, and then that same government worker puts that fire out. I mean, maybe that's the extent of government's ability to solve a problem that they create. But we're talking like large industrial-sized problems. you can't expect them to be able to solve it like long-term, like real solutions.
Indeed, and speaking of real solutions, let's get into our Last Nighters portion of the show, which is our solution to provide you a version of the show worth sharing that doesn't have anarchy stank on it via the name Actual Anarchy. We are passionate about anarchy and what actual anarchy is, but we realize that the name is a bit of a turnoff for some people, so that's why we have our solution, The Last Nighters. So if you're ready, Robert.
Let's do this. Let's talk about this movies, Daniel.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Robert of The Last Nighters. We are The Last Nighters, and we are talking about the movie Hero starring Jet Li and Donnie Yen. And this can be found, the show notes and everything can be found at that was my rewind sound. lastnighters.com. lastnighters.com/14. So this is the 14th episode of The Last Nighters, talking about Hero with Jet Li. So how you doing, Robert? We're going to get into the Google description in just a moment here.
Oh, I'm doing lovely, sir. I'm feeling fresh and fancy-free. Smelling good, feeling good. You know, when you smell good, you feel good. I think that's the rule in life.
All right.
So
Quack like
if
a
you
duck
don't feel good, take a bath, you filthy animal.
All right. So you're quacking like a duck. You're feeling good. So Hero came out 2002, foreign film, drama action, 2 hours. I think this is made in China, starring Jet Li and Donnie Yen and a couple of other folks. I can't really pronounce their names. I feel a little bit bad about that. Right. 7.9 on the IMDb, 95% Rotten Tomatoes, 3.5 by Robert, 3.5 out of 4 by Roger Ebert.
Are you having a stroke right now? I need to be worried.
I'm off my game tonight. 79% of Google users like it, and I find that kind of interesting because generally speaking, the Google users are a bit more of the, if it's a good movie, they'll generally say so, even if the critics don't like it. But this is a little bit lower than the critics. I'm a little bit surprised there.
I am surprised. I was just looking at a movie today, I forget the name of it, that was something like in the teens, like 17, 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. But was it like 91% Google users? They're pretty a forgiving bunch, those Google users.
That they are. Is surprising. And their editor wrote this as a description. In this visually arresting martial arts epic set in ancient China, an unnamed fighter, played by Jet Li, is being honored for defeating 3 of the king's most dangerous enemies. When Nameless recounts his battles with the assassins, Broken Sword, Flying Snow, and Moon, the king begins to question some of the details. As Nameless goes on, the king challenges the tales, interjecting his own take on these perhaps suspect version of events. Came out August 27, 2004 in the U.S., but it was filmed a few years prior, came out in China in 2002, and it is a pretty interesting movie. What do you think of that description, Robert?
Yeah, that's pretty dang accuratto. I had originally seen this movie when it came out, so we're talking a long time ago, and it kind of ruined the subsequent watching because I knew right away, spoiler alert, that of course the original story that Jet Li is telling the Emperor is a fabrication. But it didn't stop me from enjoying the movie overall, and we'll get into it. But it's a very mixed movie for me because on the one hand it kind of celebrates rebellion and not necessarily like rebellion. Well, it is kind of celebrating rebellion, but overthrowing tyranny, fighting back against tyranny. This is the story of the first emperor of China, essentially. The guy, every tyrant has the same fantasy, that they are going to unite the world. Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, name a tyrant throughout history, and they basically have the exact same idea. We have all these little warring states, these little warring factions. Let's conquer the whole planet, and then we'll have an end to war. It's the same idea that Emperor Palpatine has in Star Wars. It's always the bad guy, and it's a bad guy for a reason because it's a really dumb idea. Now, yes, you essentially trade one form of horrific violence for another. It never gets at the root cause, which is the belief in authority, which causes these issues. So it's one guy saying, well, once I get rid of all these warlords and whatnot, I'll be the one king warlord, and we'll have peace. And it doesn't matter how many people I need to murder to accomplish that. So they're basically saying, it's a completely horrifically, immoral mixed message. Which is it? Is murder and horrific, violence bad, or is it good? Can it be used for good? Me, as a libertarian, I say, of course not. You're violating people's property and their lives, even no matter how noble your dumb goal is. Because, as I think Star Wars beautifully illustrates, even if you do unite all these lands, and Genghis Khan found this out, Rome found this out. I mean, they all found it out eventually. Some of them took longer to learn this lesson than others. But people ruled with an iron fist tend to resent it. People forced into a bigger collective tend to think, well, I don't really identify with these policies being imposed on us from half a world away. Shocker. I know, it's a shocker. Surprise. But, oh, my God, these people don't appreciate all the peace I've forced upon them.
Oh, those remaining.
Right, for those still alive, still breathing. I mean, I think Dave Smith points this out, and he's pointing it out from other people who've said it before him. But essentially, terrorism is the cost of empire. It is the way of the ruled people to fight back with whatever means they have at their disposal. So the idea that you would just have this peace after you conquer all these people and they'll just thank you for it is like the dumbest fantasy ever. And this movie does not provide a clear message on that. There's the broken sword guy who's fully on board with this idea. He's like, hell to the yeah. Kill everybody. Force this peace on people. It's going to be a great idea. Then there's the Jet Li character who, for the most of the movie, is like, no, he's trying to wipe out my people and my land. You know, this home. He comes from like this little 10,000 square acre, or this tiny little prefecture or whatever they're called in China. And he's like, no, this emperor is going to kill us all. I need to fight back and stop this guy because he's a murdering tyrant. And then there's what's the girl's name? Snow falling something or other, wind, or what is it?
Flying Snow, I think.
Yeah, okay. So she's on board with it. And then the Donnie Yen character, he's on board with it. I forget his name. He fights with a spear, though. Remember that. But anyway, and then at the end, Jet Li is like eventually like, okay, I'm not going to kill you. And he ends up getting murdered, / they call it executed. And then they bury him as a hero. Aw, isn't that nice? What you do with my bones afterwards. Oh, it's so respectful for murdering me. Whatever. I found this movie's message incredibly mixed and ultimately terrible. I could understand why, this would get sell well in China, right? I mean, this is like nationalism. This is patriotism for China. They take like a great amount of pride in their land, and they're kind of married to this idea that uniting all these Chinese people was a fantastic thing, no matter how it was done, nor how much blood was used in the mortar. What did you have to feel about this movie, Daniel?
Yeah, so we're talking the feels here. I think you stole a lot of my thunder there, because I was going to say that it's basically an argument for world government, and you hear it with, like you had pointed out, all the tyrants of history, but even the League of Nations and the United Nations, and of course conspiracy theorists around, all talking about world government and the Amero and
world order and
the world order, 1,000 points of light and all that stuff. And, of course, you're right. There's already too much centralization of power that's going on, and that's how governments are even able to amass the destructive capacity that they do have. I mean, Robert Higgs points out in many of his contrasts and comparisons between an anarchist society and a government statist society, and he's like, well, anarchists didn't commit the atrocities in China and murder 60 million people, starve 40 million in Russia, kill 6 million Jews. These were governments. These were states. These were concentrations and masses of power that you're not able to, or even have the need to, create in a free society. So it's only because you can tax and extract productive resources from the people, from your tax cattle, that you can then squander it on these very destructive things. So that's kind of my little mini rant there. I did want to say that the movie, it was toying with me, because I might have seen it quite a while ago, and I hardly remembered it, but some of it was vaguely familiar. But I didn't recall enough to know whether the Jet Li character was going to give him one last twist at the end or not, because I kind of thought and was hoping that when he revealed the Broken Sword story, that Broken Sword said our land, or whatever the Chinese version of it. I know the U.S. version, it was changed to our land. I think in Chinese it was supposed to be under heaven, or all under heaven. So in essence, the material world. That he had decided not to kill the king of Quan. How do you say the name of the region? Is it Quan or Quinn or something like that?
I think it's like Qin or something like that. I don't ask me. I believe it's the
root of China, right? So it's probably Qin dynasty.
Yeah, it's the first empire, whatever it was called.
Yeah. So forget where I was going with that, but I thought there was going to be one last twist, and he was going to use it because the king had sort of discovered his plot. Like, hey, you're able to advance closer to me, and I have all this protection and all these measures in place to keep people away from me because there have been assassination attempts multiple times, and I'm very careful. And now you're close enough to do your, 10-meter dash stabbing attack that no one can stop. Right. The Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon shit. And he had called him out on it, saying, well, I think you're here to kill me. And, of course, he was correct. But then the broken sword story, I thought, was to buy him time or some other, avenue of accomplishing his goal. And that's one thing I don't totally understand is broken sword was like, okay, yeah, the king is an evil dude. He's a bit of a tyrant, and he even admits it himself. But he's the only one capable of concentrating enough power to make this happen. He's the only one who has the capacity to kill enough people to overcome their resistance to impose this quote-unquote peace upon them, all those that remain alive. And I just don't get behind that message at all. It makes zero sense to me. I mean, the idea of a world peace is a noble goal, but the means by which he intends to achieve it are pure evil, and by extension, the results would be very evil. There would be most of the people dead.
And the ones left alive would resent the shit out of him.
Yeah, and to think that, okay, so you're going to kill a bunch of people, build up all this resentment, and then concentrate even more power than you had before, right? When it's the 7 individual kingdoms, there's already various levels of concentration of power because they're warring states fighting each other. But now you're going to get this, it's all 7 together and potentially even more, right? Expand beyond that. And these are people with different languages, different cultures, different belief systems. It already is so, you're already so top down trying to control enough people, and then to just add more to that mix, you're going to get so much further away from what any of those individuals want, right? We've talked about this in shows in the past where whatever level of government people who are statists are approving of, government's changing all the time. It's always growing, right? It's always getting more and more and more. So at what point is it right for you or me or you listener over there? It's going to change by next week. And so this whole concentration of power and essentially getting to even a world government, you're right, it would just breed additional atrocities and other types of maybe not outright warfare, but like despotism, secret police and restrictions and controls upon people. Like in present day China, there's a game system called Sesame Credit, which essentially is a social network that gives you a score based on how good of a citizen you are. And you get different rewards or restrictions based on how good of a citizen you are. I mean, that's some, Orwellian nightmare shit right there. And yet it's coming, to a country near you. Just crazy shit.
Yeah. And it's sold, they sell it in seemingly positive, ways. Like it's completely optional to start. You just get benefits, like you're talking about essentially what was mostly a communist country. It's slowly getting more and more free market, but now it's going back in the other direction here with the Sesame Credit shit. So it's sold as like, your papers that you're applying for will get through faster. Your plane ticket will get approved, or your travel pass will get approved, or maybe you'll get a slight discount on this or that. It's only a matter of time before it all becomes super mandatory and you start getting real world violently punished for not being a good citizen, for not having, getting turned in by your friends or your family members for not doing a certain thing or doing a certain thing. And this is like, China, there's a long history of this sort of thing with the struggle sessions in Mao. If you're not familiar with that, look that up. Basically where you would get into some sort of like a community situation and everybody had to like admit their sins against the state essentially each week, and you better have something to say. So if you don't, you have to like narc on your relatives if they're doing anything that supposedly, is against whatever they make up. It's a nightmare, and it's everything that has nothing to do with liberty or freedom in any way. Now, I've heard some libertarians talk about this in a positive light, and under a strictly voluntary situation, not instituted by a government, I'm okay with it. I mean, if a company is like, we're going to sell, our products for 5% less, to people that do X, that are, whatever, environmentally conscious, or, don't support the war machine, or whatever. That's perfectly, they have those things, they're called like rewards cards. But essentially, if you were to volunteer this sort of information of like your personal life, like, look how good of a person I am, give me more discounts, I would be more on board with it. But this is top-down instrument, it's essentially a corporation, I believe, it's making this thing, and it's in conjunction with the government, and it's voluntary to start. But mark my words, it will not eventually, unless there's a massive pushback, I can't imagine it not being ultimately mandatory.
Yeah, and just to jump off on that point, I mean, everything that ends up being, the bane of everyone's existence is always presented as some innocuous, like, oh, only the top 1% will ever pay income taxes. Oh, Social Security will never get out of hand. It's you're putting money in and just getting the money back out, and we're protecting you. Meanwhile, it's a redistribution scheme, and now almost every class of any earning gets income tax. And everything's always presented as this, like, initially, it's only going to affect a very small number of people, and it's only going to be very tiny amounts, and don't worry, and it reminds me of, you mentioned the struggle sessions and people ratting on each other. It's like East German Stasi type shit, and they had a wall, Berlin, divided east from west, and that was a wall to keep people in. And I know Trump wants to do a wall on the Mexican border to keep people out. Well, it's not that difficult to change the direction in which the wall is intended to restrain people or limit them on both sides. And that ties us back to the movie, because the emperor, at the end, it's revealed that he is the one who built the Great Wall of China to protect his subjects after he murdered a whole shit ton of them.
Yeah, to deal with the Mongolian hordes, who are the villains in Mulan and other movies. Yeah, it's an incrementalism, and people that advocate for a policy, I mean, if you're advocating for something to be used against another person, it's only a matter of time before it'll be used against you. So be careful when you advocate for violence. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and I have a rant on voting that I wanted to share. And I view this as democracy, or even a constitutional republic, just voting in general. And I know this can be a controversial opinion and doesn't really relate to this movie directly, but they are in essence trying to establish a better society in their heads or in their minds, and they're sort of like the power voters in the movie. So allow me to rant.
Do it, Daniel.
Essentially, I see voting as violence. And I don't, in the political sense, I view it as violence because you are subjugating anyone who said no or voted for the other side or didn't vote at all to whatever the winning position was. So really the only non-aggressive method of voting is to say no to any additional tax or regulation. But even this defensive voting gives credence to the system at all, right? And some people will quibble with that, but I feel like if you're voting at all, it's a sign to them, a signal to them that, oh, this is something we want to continue doing, right? And if you really break it down, it's basically saying that my life and my property are not truly my own, and they are subject to the uninformed decisions of others. And it makes it really easy to mask the violence that it is, because it outsources that violence and socializes the costs of the violence so that it's no longer up to each individual to rob their neighbor. Now they can just tick a box and their neighbor will be robbed. And as we know, studying economics, reducing the price of something tends to increase the consumption of it. So really, it is violence. It's just a few added steps, and it alters the language to obscure its true nature. And tying it back to the movie, one of the points that was made in the film was that there are all these different cultures, like we were talking about before, speaking different languages, and many don't really understand each other. So the king's response was, I'll just force them all to speak one language. And this reminds me of this world language movement that was happening about 50 years ago, where they were trying to introduce a new language called Esperanto. And I think that this was related to trying to help enact world socialism. Because there's all these socialists who are like, oh, we all want to speak not English, because English is the language of the evil capitalists. So we're going to create this new language called Esperanto and get everyone speaking it. Because top-down solutions, one size fits all, is the right way to go. Right, Robert?
Oh, it's always the best. When you try and force people to do a thing, they always react super positively. Because, amazingly, believe this or not, Daniel, central planners don't know everything. They don't have all the best answers for every single human being on planet. You just don't. There's no such thing. There's no one body. There's no one group that has all the answers for every single human being. But they pretend like they do. Not only do they pretend like they do, they also pretend like they have the moral right to do it, to force it on everybody. And they don't have either one of those things. They don't have the right answers, and they don't have the moral right to force it on everybody. And all they cause is problems and discord and resentment. Because, I mean, who's got the best idea of how to spend your money? You or some guy in Olympia? You or some guy in, whatever, wherever you happen to be in the world. It's going to be you, even if you're wrong. Like some of the time. And you come back and you go, oh, I wish I hadn't bought this thing. That was dumb. You're still a million times better at spending your own money than some bureaucrat, who doesn't know you, who's never met you, lives, whoever knows how long far away from you. It's impossible for them to ever represent you in any real way. It's an insane system. And people defend it to the death because they go, well, the best we got. It's not perfect, but it's the best we got. No, you're wrong. Freedom is the best we got. Yeah, and we prove it every day of the week, every minute of the day.
Human sacrifice is the best system. It's not it's not the greatest. It's just the best one we got. So anyway, I want to shift topics a little bit on you. We still haven't implemented categories, but I just want to mention that Donnie Yen, that fight scene at the chess club, awesome, brilliant.
Oh, Donnie Yen's a stud. I don't know if you followed his work much over the years, but yeah, he's a brilliant martial artist.
Yeah, I did watch the Ip Man trilogy, and it starts off really good, and then it gets a little hokey, especially with Mike Tyson in Ip Man 3. But
Mike Tyson's in Ip Man 3? Okay.
Yeah, that's right, baby. I don't think we're going to get to the Ip Man 3 on this
show. Is this like
a
Street Fighter 2 Balrog situation where they're having a street fight and Mike Tyson shows up and he's like the big boxer guy? Does he have boxing gloves on?
No, he's the big bad businessman who's behind the scenes pulling the strings, and he agrees that if Donnie Yen lasts 3 minutes with him in a fist fight in his office, he'll leave him alone or something like that. Anyway, this isn't about that movie. But Donnie Yen is a stud, and the choreography and the cinematography and just the style of this film is really brilliant. It is beautifully done, very high level of craft. They are trying to evoke stunning imagery and trying to pull out some art out of this, I think. Just with
this movie, I was surprised. I thought this was Wen Wu-ping, who's the famous choreographer from Matrix and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But it wasn't. It was another guy. I don't know if he's worked with Wu-ping or learned from Wu-ping at all, but I thought this was man, Wu-ping is at his Wu-pingiest. This is peak Wu-ping. This is peak Ping. But it wasn't. But you're right. This movie is incredibly artistic. It is, in a word, poetic. I know that, martial artists like to compare martial arts to, ballet or an art form or a dance. And this is, one of the danciest martial arts movies I've seen in a long time. And just, like you said, the imagery is beautifully done, especially my favorite was probably the yellow tree fight scene. That was really beautiful. But yeah, just really good stuff. Also, the Donnie Yen fight, just because he's such a stud. But yeah, beautifully done movie. I hate the overall message is just such crap.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention the water fight scene with the Ninja Jesus because they're walking on the water.
Oh man, yeah. It reminded me of Chinese folklore is rife with heroes and kind of like hero worship kind of stuff. And what is the name? It's the one with Sun Wukong and that folklore stuff. Someone's probably screaming into their listening to this right now. Sorry, but their history is filled with heroes who are capable of amazing feats. Just crazy superhuman type shit. And so then you get a series like Dynasty Warriors. I don't know if you're familiar with that video game series, but that's essentially where one Chinese hero guy can just mow through just thousands and thousands and thousands of regular human dudes. And this movie, reminded me of that, where you got just these superhuman level heroes taking out just hundreds and thousands of guards like they're nothing. But if you're down with that kind of style and it doesn't bother you, you can absolutely enjoy it. But it might annoy some people because it is a bit kind of Mary Sue-y in that the heroes aren't really given a challenge. Because if you got these four heroes, it seems like they could just walk in, kill the emperor's entire army, and then just walk up and kill the emperor. I mean, why not? What's stopping you? If you're like this superhuman badasses that can't be killed, they're cutting through shields like they're tissue paper, and just, one spin kick takes out like 10 soldiers and sends them flying and shit. Even, or they're like spin kicking clouds of arrows away. It's very poetic and beautifully done and all that, but it is, it's fairly ridiculous, of course.
Yeah, I wonder if the backstory on this is that they were like almost demigod types, these assassin/warrior types. Like
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure they've all been, super mythicized. But it's not Romance of the Three Kingdoms. What is it? What am I thinking of? Damn it, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, they go on an adventure. They've made all kinds of movies about it. Damn it. Showing my ignorance, I hate it.
Oh, it's all right. We show it off all the time on this show. So let's get back a little bit. I wanted to ask you, because they keep referring to calligraphy and swordplay and the warrior and the way of the warrior, and there's like different levels, and they reach these epiphanies, and the final one is that you put down your sword and realize that you don't need to kill. And I think that's sort of the progression that Jet Li goes on in this in the retelling, because he's hell-bent on killing the king, right? I mean, the king is an evil dude. Thousands of people are dying at his feet as a result of the decisions he's making.
Yep.
So what do you feel about this narrative of that once you reach peak warrior, that you no longer have the desire to kill, or like you've transcended that?
Yeah, I don't think you need to learn that through killing people, but I think that's one path to go about it, because you ultimately realize, oh, geez, I've killed all these people, and look, I haven't made the world a better place at all. Shocking. Kind of like the lesson learned in The Last Supper, the last movie that we did, where these lefty progressive college students were killing all these people, and of course they're slapping themselves on the back saying, oh, look at all these next Hitlers that we prevented. But and ultimately I don't think they actually really learned their lesson in that movie, but in the real world, hopefully, a lot of warriors and soldiers, they come back from war and they go, holy shit, here I was all gung-ho to go do a thing, to defend my country or to go kill the bad guy, and look at all I did was cause a whole bunch of misery and pain, and I didn't accomplish a damn thing. And all I did, so that is one way to do it. I don't know about, reaching the peak ultimate, that's like the ultimate secret knowledge at the end of the warrior's path, or if it's an allegory for that. I got to assume it's more of an allegory than it is a real thing, where once you learn enough about being a soldier that you ultimately realize that you don't need to be a soldier. I think you can just kind of look at what the end result of soldiers is. That tends to be my opinion. I don't feel a desire. I don't know about you, Daniel, but I don't feel a desire to go pick up a gun and go shoot some people that never caused me any problems before in their own land for no reason other than to get a bunch of defense contractors a bunch of money, a bunch of stolen money. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I thought that it was a progression that is kind of interesting, because I feel like it is a realization that perhaps you don't need to use violence to get what you want. And if I liken that to his achievement of this, what do they call it, actualization, where he then realizes that, using all this violence is not the solution. I want to say that that's where we are at. We have this crazy extremist idea that violence isn't your first option to try to solve the world's ills. It is, in fact, only the last option, and only in terms of self-defense or defense of another innocent person. And if people were, like you said earlier, dropped that false belief in authority and went with their own understanding of right and wrong and saw violence for what it was, or the political process for the violence it was, and achieved this warrior status where you drop that voting, you drop the gun in the ribs of your neighbor held by an agent of the state that you're voting for, then the world would in fact be a better place.
100%, buddy. That is the goal. It's trying to convince people with non-specialized knowledge that what you learned when you were 2 years old, when your mother said don't hit people, is the proper way to live your life. And why wouldn't you want to hit somebody? Because you wouldn't like it if somebody hit you. It's really that simple. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that other people own themselves just like you own yourself. And it's like you said, recognizing them that at the end of your vote is a mandatory effect carried out with violence by agents of the state. So no matter how well-intentioned you are,
when you think that some new regulation needs to come into effect, or there ought to be a law about a thing, you are advocating for somebody to die, and I don't think people recognize that.
And it does sound hyperbolic there. It does sound extreme. But all we're saying is that if you look at the logical progression and if the recipient of that enforcement resists in any way.
Sometimes even you don't have to resist. Sometimes you could just be a guy sitting there, and because of a drug law, some guys in black with submachine guns can bust into your house, shoot your dog, not even identify themselves. You think you're being invaded by some criminal thugs, which is true. You shoot back, and they fill you full of bullets. And that happens all the time. And so, yeah. Anyway, continue, Daniel. Sorry.
Oh, man, hard to laugh at that. But I think we went way sideways on our little tangent here. But the essence is that the way of the warrior achieving their actualization is that they lay down the sword. And in the lead up to that, he was mentioning that to a warrior, even a blade of grass can be a weapon. And I just thought that was interesting because of recent events where guns are now demonized, even more so due to the Parkland shooting. And
sure.
I think the point in the movie with a blade of grass can be a weapon is that anything can be a weapon. Anything used as such is in fact a weapon. And a funny thing, I think we brought this up perhaps in the Billy Madison episode or in The Last Supper, was that the schools are now talking about putting a bucket of rocks in the classrooms to defend themselves against someone attacking with firearms. And, those rocks are then a weapon. And sure, more effective than hiding behind a desk, but a weapon nonetheless.
Well, and these are all people trying to put Band-Aids on situations. Because ultimately the most dangerous weapon ever is the human mind. And the solution for solving that problem of a weaponized human mind is to not aggress against them. It's to treat them well. And that's pretty basic shit, that people respond to how well they are treated. They respond to incentives also. But people aren't born monsters. They're created. And you can weaponize the mind really easily by murdering their families, bombing their weddings, because people, they tend to get pissed off when their loved ones get murdered.
Yeah, and Flying Snow, her father died resisting the King of Qin, I think is how we agreed on saying it.
Sure,
and that's why she's so bent on eliminating him, assassinating him. And she is at odds with Broken Sword over this because he's trying to take this higher plane, and she's seeking revenge and stopping the continued atrocities, because it's very apparent, like during the storm advance on the calligraphy school that they're both at, they're just hurling tens of thousands of arrows into this entire school, killing everyone in the school except for the 3 super demigod warriors. And
right.
The master of the school says, we're going to keep writing, even though this hail of arrows is coming down killing us. And I thought that was also trying to make a point, something along the lines of, you can't use violence to shut down our speech. We're going to continue to write. We're going to continue to say what we're going to say, even though you kill us in the process.
Right, and it's also another way to say it would be a way that V says it in V for Vendetta, and that ideas are bulletproof, and nothing can stop an idea that whose time has come or something like that. But yeah, no matter how hard you try, Emperor, you cannot silence us, and our words and our ideas will spread, and you cannot kill them, no matter how hard you try.
Right, but then they show the evil of this man the whole movie, and then they make him win. It's so weird.
Yeah. I don't know if they had to get this movie past like the government censor board. We can't have the Emperor die at the end. Come on, make it so he lives. He's such a hero and awesome guy. It's such a great plan, conquering the world so that you can have peace. Great idea.
Yeah, and of course it's based on, the historical story, so he had to live. But it's like they had to twist it into this a positive, like this silver lining is, hey, we're this great big country now. Sure, thousands of people had to die in the process, or a huge percentage of the population. It seems crazy to me, and maybe that's my westernized eyes looking at it. Like, how can anyone think this is a good thing?
Oh yeah, and then the ones that lived through it are the ones that didn't resist, right? They're the ones that are like obeying, going along to get along. They're basically the bootlicking supplicants. So that's the takeaway from this movie, is that yes, you should just submit to tyrants because that's a good thing. What kind of message is that to tell anybody? That's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
even
really
Jet Li at the
one
end.
Of the movies. Go ahead. I was gonna say it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. That's all I was gonna say. Go ahead, Daniel.
And that's an excellent point. But Jet Li, and I wrote this down, he says, because of my decision today, many will die, and your majesty will go on living. A dead man begs you to never forget the ultimate ideal for a warrior is to lay down his sword. And then the emperor orders him murdered, executed, and then he still goes on and fights the remaining 6 kingdoms and unites them. So I don't really understand, after this speech, where he's trying to impart this wisdom, whether it had really any effect other than to get him a hero's burial. And they kept saying, make an example of him, even though the king at the time was like, oh, I actually have respect for this guy and I don't want him to die, but the law says I must, and therefore I will murder him, even though he's the king. So is he saying that he is bound by the law, or that he can't change the law? I mean, the whole Magna Carta thing.
They follow it when it's convenient. They follow it when it's something they want to do anyway. That's the truth of the matter. When there's someone in the ruling class, you know, they don't want to do something like, oh, I'm sorry, bound by the law, or when they do want to do something, oh, I'm sorry, it's the law, I got to do it. You know, they don't care.
All right. Well, yeah, I was just trying to throw in Magna Carta stuff because that was like the point in Western history where the king was no longer above the law. And I believe it was intended to say that there are natural laws that exist above and beyond even any, you know, human king, human authority. And it's been a struggle ever since to create more and more of that recognition of what natural rights are. And just one last time on the soapbox regarding the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment does not grant rights. The Bill of Rights does not grant rights. It is there delineating what natural rights previously exist and are not to be messed with by the government.
Correct. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the right.
No infringement.
Right. It doesn't say it creates a right. It just says that it makes no law that shall abridge that right. Correct, Daniel.
All right, so I just wanted to get that out there. Now, we're almost we're running up against time here. So let's do any last comments you have before we do our Tears Jerked and then our final summary and review.
I can't think of anything. Let's just move it on.
All right. We opened with emotional content, so let's talk about the Tears Jerked out of this and summary and review.
Well, there's strong, there's some good emotional work in this movie. There's the relationship between the flying snow lady and the broken sword dude. There's a scene where, it's essentially, there's the Jet Li is essentially telling a story, and the first story he tells is a lie, and then, the truth comes out slowly, is revealed after the multiple tellings. But there's a scene in which Jet Li has to sacrifice one of these assassins, to get within striking distance of the Emperor. And Broken Sword and the Flying Snow Lady are both on their way to this meeting, and they both get the idea that I am going to, injure my loved one so that I'm going to go get sacrificed and not you. And this is during the Emperor's telling. He thinks that one is actually dead, but actually they both lived because Jet Li's such a master swordsman that he can stab you, and it looks like you're going to die, but you're not really going to die. Anyway, before you know that fact, you're seeing these two people that care about each other so much that they're willing to die to protect that other person. And then they say, well, what's worth living if I can't live with you? There's some good emotional stuff there, good tones. Turns out to be not a true story, but at the time when you're watching it, you don't know that. And yeah, well done.
All right. So my Tears Jerked are similar. There is a lot of tugging at heartstrings when it comes to who's caring about another, just like you had pointed out. I found that I was also angered by much of this, and I think it mostly had to do with their appeals to the greater good and the uniting of the country. And he even brings up the king says that there's no way that you are a citizen of my region because no member of my region would try to kill me. And that's how I know you're not from here. And I was like, What does that have to do with anything? But anyway, so a little bit of Tears Jerked. I'm going to go with like 4 out of 10 Tears Jerked on that. What was your number on that?
I'll say, I'll give it one notch higher. I'll give it a 5. For the majority of the movie, there's not a lot of Tears Jerked, but a few key scenes are pretty strong. Yeah,
and then there is I guess what is the truthful version where Flying Snow and Broken Sword do fight, and to prove that he cares for her, he doesn't defend himself and lets her kill him. And then she then commits suicide using the sword that's already in him so that they can die together. And that was emotional, but also really kind of dumb.
Yeah, that one wasn't nearly as emotional as the lie story for me. Because that tied into the official crux of the argument.
Yeah,
are we going to be a collective, and is this ruling the world a great idea or not? And I've already established which side of the argument I'm on.
Oh, very much so. In fact, we veered very far from the movie to get into that. But let's do our final summary and review, and then we will wind the show down.
All right, so this movie, I think you can watch it and enjoy it for the most part until I think it really just kind of falls apart at the very end for me, with the Jet Li character changing his mind or basically being convinced that killing the Emperor is a bad idea. And he gets convinced that, collectivism and world government and murdering empire is fantastic because it's romanticized and it's stupid. It's utopian idea that you can create the perfect ruling system for everybody on Earth. Are you kidding me? One centralized ruler knows what's best for every single other person on Earth? What madness is this? It's mad hubris. Mad hubris. And it's still in effect today. This is like the constant struggle with humanity that think that they can just tinker with, force just right. So that you got the majority of the world that are either full-blown statists or full-blown minarchists or, just minarchists. Anyway, the movie is poetic and beautiful and beautifully shot. The fight scenes are very artfully done. They're like dances. If you don't mind your protagonists being like essentially superheroes. And it has a philosophical argument to make, even though I mightily disagree with the answer given in the movie. So I will give this movie 5 out of 10. I want it up till the last 10 minutes. This movie is like I'd give it more like a 7.5 to 8. But no, you can't tease me with a good movie and then betray me at the end movie. I'm sorry. You get a 5. Daniel?
All right, I enjoyed your summary, and I also found this to be a very beautiful film, a lot of cinematography, a lot of poetry, brilliant choreography of the martial arts, fight scenes, and I was thoroughly enjoying the fragmented storytelling. It was almost mysterious. Yeah. It maintained tension that whole time, right? Because
what the truth was. Yeah, that was really fun. Sorry.
Yeah, so it was like a vehicle to get him closer and closer to within striking distance of the king, and they color-coded them so you could kind of tell them apart, and I think upon rewatching it might make a little bit more sense, right? Because they had the white, the orange, the blue, the red, the different kind of keys for each of the scenes or each of the narratives that was going on, and I kept hoping that the final twist was going to be, when he told the broken sword story, that he was appealing to the king's vanity, because the king was like, oh, finally someone understands me. This is amazing. Yeah, you see, I'm being this really bad motherfucker to do something really good, and finally someone gets it. I was so hoping he was using that to get his guard down to be able to actually, assassinate that dude, because he was an evil dude. In The Last Supper, we talked about their philosophical question was, do you kill baby Hitler or Hitler before he's done anything wrong? And of course the story is, or the correct answer is no. You talk to the man. You try to find out why, assuming that you know the knowledge that in the future he's going to do this atrocity, you try to reason with him. Well, this guy had already committed atrocities. I mean, he's already a war criminal. So, and you know that he's going to commit more atrocities. He's basically telegraphing it. He's saying it. He's like, I'm going to unite the kingdoms, hell or high water. I'm going to murder people to do it. So you know that assassinating him is going to eliminate that. Granted, you're also probably going to have some other number 2 rise up and try to do the same thing. So it's a multi-headed hydra of a beast. But like you, I was riding real high on this movie until that end point. I was thinking, hey, this is an 8 or a 9. I mean, this is beautiful, really well done, and the storytelling, the narrative, I almost felt like it was Memento and Quentin Tarantino-esque, and actually Tarantino was attached to this a little bit in bringing it to the U.S. I think it sat in obscurity for a little while, and people weren't willing to release it in the U.S., and then Tarantino stepped in and helped get it into distribution in the United States. So I think that's good, and it almost played a little bit like Pulp Fiction in the fragmented storytelling.
Well, that would make sense. That would explain why the guy that voiced the Emperor was the same guy that's in Big Trouble in Little China. That was fun. I liked that.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
Wang Lo, or what is his name in Big Trouble in Little China? I forget.
Lo Pan.
Lo Pan, that's right.
Yeah, I love that movie. We should do that one sometime.
We should. But yeah, you're right. The storytelling was really fun. The colors and the storytelling with the the way that they told the story with the lies, what was the truth, and getting to that. So it was almost like a mystery. It was just so well done. And then at the very end, it's just a big piece of government propaganda. It's so disappointing.
Yeah, it takes quite the turn. So rather than the 8 or 9, I'm going to go probably with a 4 or a 5 on this bad boy. Though I do recommend seeing it, especially after listening to us just lambast the turn, because it is really well done. It's beautiful, and Donnie Yen's a badass, and he actually survives at the end. Spoilers, everyone. Ha! But anyway, I think that's going to wind us down for this show. This is The Last Nighters. You can find the show notes page and more at lastnighters.com/14. And I'm going to say good night from last night.
It's been an honor and a white privilege talking to everybody. You have a good night, you beautiful, beautiful people.
All right, and continuing the transmission on Actual Anarchy, and this is actualanarchy.com/71 for the show notes on this one. We'll go for a few more minutes, and then we'll get into some Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which you can get on the Patreon bonus content. Support us at patreon.com/ReadRothbard to get a piece of that action. So, Robert, my thoughts.
Yo.
We went way anarchist in our...
Oh, yeah.
On our summary of the movie.
It was so inspired by the movie. I mean, we couldn't not do it, honestly. I mean, the whole question was, is empire a good idea? I mean, we have to address it. We couldn't not say anything.
Yeah, it's definitely the elephant in the room. But now that the kids who aren't cool with the anarchy are not listening, I did want to mention that there is a little bit of cultural appropriation in this. When it was brought into the U.S., the movie poster, Jet Li is holding what appears to be a Japanese katana, and not not the sword with the hollow middle that he uses in the film. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That makes no sense. Are they saying that American audiences are so stupid they only recognize katanas? I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Why would we care?
It's a marketing thing.
Just because we don't, maybe a lot of people don't understand the difference between a Chinese version of a sword and a Japanese version of a sword, but who cares? Anyway, oh well, it's just a marketing decision.
Yes, and then there was a Time magazine review of the film by Richard Corliss, and he makes this observation. He says, men must make war to secure the peace. And he says that's kind of one of the points of the movie. And I don't buy that at all. That's very neocon.
Gross. I mean, you'll make a lot of money spouting that kind of bullshit, because there's plenty of defense contractors and government types that want to have an intellectual cover to their policies, but that's so far from the truth, it's ridiculous. And that's just the way to perpetuate war and murder and death and keep making the world a shitty place.
Now, on an individual level, though, I do believe that the capacity to have self-defense is a deterrent to crime. And so I think that they're taking that truth and extrapolating it out to where it breaks down on a nation scale. Right.
Well, but it's never, I mean, they say one thing and then they do another. They constantly say that, oh, well, it's just for national defense. Oh, is that why you have hundreds of bases worldwide? And that's why you fight all these wars of aggression constantly? Oh, no. Those are wars of defense against bad people who are starting these things. That's why that's the same excuse that all the tyrants start all the time.
Well, and they do the
fire, the Gulf of Tonkin, they're never the ones that start it. Oh, no, it's the evil other people. And we're just doing this defensively, and that's why we're invading defensively. It's horseshit.
Yeah, and they did the Orwellian language switch, right? It used to be the Secretary of War, the Department of War, and then it changed. So Anyway, there's all that good stuff. And then Jet Li, he's a bit of a world government type, promoting UN-style solutions to things. And so he really likes this movie. There's 3 movies that he considers part of his legacy, and this is one of them. And he says the lesson from this one is the suffering of one person can never be as significant as the suffering of a nation.
Gross. That's just another way to say that your life is not as important as that of the collective, and the collective can destroy you if it's better for the collective. And where do you draw the line? Because you can always come up with some dumbass excuse as to why you need to be exterminated for the good of the collective. If you engage in some wrongthink, if you're not towing the particular party line that's currently popular. People's opinions and values and policy from government change all the time, and there's always going to be disagreement with human beings. No two people are going to hold the same opinion on everything. So there's an endless number of excuses that can be used to kill you under collectivism, socialism, communism. You can call it whatever you want, but it is collectivism. It is putting the rights of the many above the rights of the individual. And it's the reason why people die in the hundreds of millions through it. It's a shit show that's as old as time, and humanity still hasn't learned the lesson. Well, I think we have, but as a whole, these fuckers are still using these ideas. It has been debunked over and over and over again. But Daniel's just depressing. I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, I know. I'm bursting our bubble here. But and the king of Qin, if we're saying that right, he sets the stage for 2,000 years later for Mao to be pulling his shit and 40 or 50 million people dying as a result. So, it's just a continuation of that collective. And there are no real collective rights. It's only individuals that exist. And so to go this like super utilitarian route and try to make interpersonal comparisons across value of like people's lives is pretty crazy, and I don't support it at all. So I think that Jet Li, he's probably a nice guy. He's a great, brilliant martial artist, but I think that his ideas are very, very influenced by the culture and the government in which he grew up, and it's hard to blame the guy. I mean, it's what he believes. It's just it's pretty wrong. So. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's adding to the world of propaganda that promotes this terrible stuff. But ultimately, you're right. I mean, he is just a guy with a bad opinion. He's not, in a direct position to violently attack someone, hopefully. But he is contributing to the overall culture that finds this horrific stuff acceptable. I know he's, like you said, he was born into a very collectivistic type of culture. Hopefully that's changing with more and more capitalism, in China, lifting millions and billions of people out of poverty. But I don't know, that sort of culture is very slow to change, I think it seems like.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, because we talked about Sesame Credit in this episode earlier, and wouldn't they need to have access to social networks and computers and smartphones and whatnot? And I know that that a fair amount of people in China do. They are being lifted out of poverty, and there's a lot of capitalistic activity going on and whatnot. But aren't there also still, hundreds of millions of peasant types that wouldn't have access to these types of tools? And in essence, is capitalism providing the rope with which they will collectively hang?
Yeah, it is. But that's, capitalism's been funding every other ism since the dawn of mankind. So
that's an excellent point. Touché.
I mean, socialists, they even, I think, Russia, they fully admitted that they couldn't compete with, free markets. They just copied the prices. So they just used capitalism, and all the good things that it creates, and then they decry it after they steal all the excesses of capitalism. It's kind of capitalism's fatal flaw, in that it creates so much wealth. It allows for such bad ideas to ferment.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
you don't have to scrape by. Now you have time to protest and leisure and petition and
come up with terrible ideas. Kind of it allows for really terrible ideas to come about. It's bad. It's bad. Not that capitalism is bad, but it's one of the I don't know, unintended consequences.
It's the fuel that can be misdirected.
Yeah, they decry capitalism and all its successes, but at the same time they're living off the luxury that it provides. So it's not to say that capitalism is a living thing, but you know what I mean. I'm using shorthand here. And really, all capitalism is just voluntary exchange. It's just people following their own ends to benefit themselves, and in that turn, serving their fellow man. I mean, this is basic shit, people.
But apparently very complicated. They don't talk about this in school after kindergarten.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, all you need to know is what you learned in kindergarten. I think that was a book, came out 30 years ago, and it wasn't intended to talk about capitalism or voluntary exchange or how society would best operate, but it really kind of is. All you need to know is don't hit, don't take, try to do something productive, produce something that is going to satisfy yourself and by extension your fellow man, and things are going to work out pretty dang good.
Yeah, and then 11 more years of indoctrination, or 12 more years, or 16 more years for some people that just screws it all up.
Yep, and on that note, screwing everything up, let's end this show. Quick update from you on anything, and then we'll say goodnight.
The writing's going really well. I'm really happy with it. I don't have a timeline on when anything's going to be finished, but a little update that I'm really happy with things the way they're going right now. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for listening to this episode of Actual Anarchy with my buddy D Love and Robbie J. Take care of yourselves, everybody.
All right, yeah, thank you guys for checking this out. I hope that we weren't too much on the soapboxes on this one. I really enjoyed this movie and the conversation that was a result of it. And you can find the show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/71. You can do the Patreon stuff to get some of the bonus content, like, subscribe, share, all that stuff when we post this, and give us some love on the YouTubes and the Facebooks and all that stuff. And with that, I say goodnight. Thank you guys very much. We're going to do a little bit of Kathleen Turner Overdrive after this. Peace out.
All right, so yeah, next week, stay with us. Super Troopers, man, is coming out. Super Troopers 2 is coming out, so we're going to do Super Troopers. Classic comedy with Canadian comedy, right? I mean, what is the name of that troupe? Is there a troupe that do it?
Broken Lizard. They also
Broken
did Beer Fest and I want to say some weed-related movie. I don't know about that one though.
Yeah, I don't know, but we'll see if it holds up. But apparently, it's got a big of a fan base to do a second one. I mean, a million years later, but still.
Yeah, and I enjoyed Super Troopers, so that's going to be our next episode, 72. So check that one out next week. Super Troopers.
It is about cops. It is about road pirates. So we'll probably have a few things to say. The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.